Welcome to Unfiltered IEPs, where parents and professionals can speak freely about their own IEP experiences, both the little victories and major frustrations. I want you to hear the unfiltered version of what it's really like to be on the other side of the table. I'm your host, Colleen, the Advocate SLP, and my hope is that by facilitating conversations that are authentic and honest, we will cut through to the heart of the issues and understand both each other and the system a little better. So if you've ever found yourself thinking, I just don't get it after an IEP meeting, this podcast is for you, so stay tuned. And although I'm a speech-language pathologist and non-attorney advocate, nothing said on this pod should be taken as medical or legal advice. Experiences shared on the podcast are only the personal experiences of my guests and I for entertainment purposes only. Thanks for tuning in. So welcome to the Unfiltered IEPs Podcast. I am your host, Colleen, also known as the Advocate SLP. Today, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, my background as both an SLP and a special education advocate, and I want to share with you why I have decided to create this podcast. You heard a little bit of that in the intro, but I want to give you a more in-depth look into why I've decided to record this podcast and have a variety of different guests. I've been avoiding making this episode because it's much more interesting to me to interview other people and really get into those deep conversations about IDEA and best practices in special education and IEP implementation. But I think it's important that everyone gets a chance to get to know me a little better, especially if you've been sent this podcast by someone else and haven't been following along on my Instagram journey at theadvocate.slp. Maybe you don't know much about me yet. So this is my opportunity to share that with you. I am somebody that pretty much always knew I wanted to work with children. I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And then I actually had an opportunity in high school to take a course with the local community college that was called Intro to Teaching. And I actually got to student teach, like I did a couple lessons in a third grade classroom as a 18-year-old. And that was a really valuable experience because I learned just how much teachers have to do in terms of differentiating instruction. And I learned that I didn't really want to be in that role after all. I wanted to see students in small groups. And I had a couple opportunities to observe SLPs really early on. My grandmother was actually a speech-language pathologist, and that's how I learned about the profession. And so I actually had an opportunity to observe her when I was in undergrad, along with some other SLPs I knew, and that was it for me. I knew pretty much from then on I wanted to be a speech-language pathologist, and I wanted to work in a school, and I wanted to work in an elementary school specifically. And from freshman year of undergrad all the way until getting my first SLP job, I stuck with that. My first SLP job was in a district in central Illinois. I am from Illinois. I'm from the Chicago suburbs. And that was where I went to grad school. So I stayed in that area after grad school. My now husband was still finishing his master's degree. And I took a job in a bilingual school in particular. Now, turns out I was split between 3 schools that first year, which was a good learning curve for me. But I was mostly at that bilingual school because I had conversational Spanish. I was honest about where my Spanish proficiency was at, but they were excited to have somebody that was at least conversational and willing to get better and willing to learn. And at that school, I met some amazing teachers who are now my really close friends who I hope to have on the pod. They really helped me to improve my Spanish because they're native speakers. So that first summer after my first year as an SLP, I studied really hard. I took out AP Spanish textbooks and made flashcards and did everything I could so I could take the Illinois State Board Spanish Language Proficiency Test, which is what Spanish teachers have to take. Nobody told me I had to take it. I just felt like I needed to pass something to call myself bilingual. And then, of course, take subsequent classes in cultural and linguistic, not competency, but responsiveness and cultural humility, and always continue learning in both of these areas. This was a school that serves a lot of low SES, low socioeconomic status families, um, and of course, a lot of Spanish-speaking families. But we had a solid team. Like, we had a social worker who was like our organizer of every meeting, calendaring all the meetings, taking the notes, getting the documentation out. Like that, having that point person was amazing. And then my special education director was fantastic. She's since retired. Maybe she'll come on the podcast, but she really cared about inclusion. She really cared about doing right by the bilingual, the Spanish-speaking students. And she supported us, man. She communicated and she supported us. And it was such a great experience to have as my first job as an SLP because I got to kind of see what one of the best case scenarios can look like.
So I often think, had I stayed in Illinois, I might still be in that school district because it was a wonderful place to be. And I felt really supported as a member of that team, and like the work I did was really valued. But I moved to California and I joined a pediatric outpatient clinic, a private practice that had about 12 employees, multidisciplinary. And I learned a lot from working super closely with OTs and a PT, some of whom are still my friends. It was an interesting clinic, to say the least, and I won't get too deep into that. But I wasn't there long. There were things that I did not agree with. And that's just who I am. Like, if I cannot get down with your program, if I think there's anything unethical going on, I call it out and try to fix it. And then if it's not getting fixed, then I go. So, off to a different job after a brief stint with unemployment during the COVID pandemic at a different pediatric private practice that was really brand new. And I got to see what it looked like kind of building that practice from the ground up. I was building a caseload. I was coming off unemployment. I was happy to get the hours I could get. And so I was really working pretty part-time at first. Also doing a little bit of still Spanish tutoring on the side because when I was unemployed, I decided to start doing that to make money. Again, loved working in a multidisciplinary clinic because I got to work so closely with other SLPs and OTs, and I really got a wide variety of experiences with totally different ages and different diagnoses, and learned a lot about how to integrate movement and sensory strategies into my therapy sessions. But what I could also see was that parents did not know what the process was or what they needed to say to even like get a school district evaluation. A lot of our clients started with us when they were 2, through their insurance. They weren't even necessarily using early intervention services through the state. So a lot of us had to educate ourselves on like, what do we do when they turn 3? And who do we call and how do we even figure out what district they're in? And I knew what they needed to do in terms of writing a letter, or an email asking formally for a special education evaluation. But I did a lot of education, even just teaching parents how to look up what school district boundary they lived in. Because some of our boundaries here are kind of funky, and you might be living in a city that actually that part of the city goes to a different city school district. So we had to first make sure we knew where they were being sent. And then it just was little by little educating these families in this private clinic on what an IEP even is, what special education services can look like, and those very basic things like you have the right to get progress notes and you have the right to disagree. I was in a leadership role. I had supervised 4 SLPs in like 2 years. And I was also trying to do community liaison things, which I loved, but that took a lot of extra time that I really didn't get time in my schedule for. And so at the end of that burnout, I was like, okay, it's time to go try schools again. I've not been in a school out here in California. Let's see what this is like. Let's see if this is something I could stick out for a while at least, because I had these inklings like I might want to pursue private practice and I might want to pursue advocacy, but let's go try schools one more time. And boy, was that a different experience from my first school job. Um, Maybe one episode I'll talk about all the things that went on in that district. But let's just say I made CMS complaints. I had to write the school board, the superintendent, in addition to my special education director. There were a lot of things going on there that were not okay, for students and staff. And it was probably halfway through that year that I was like, yeah, I will not be returning. And it's time to pursue my own practice. And it's time to really dive into advocacy, because these families, again, I was at a school that was low SES that served a high population of Latino families and Native American families, and they were not being respected as equal members of the team, or being informed of things properly. And it really just lit a fire in me to be like, I'm going to be an advocate that serves all people. I'm going to find a way to reach the folks that don't usually get advocacy services, because what I saw in that district made me so mad. And I want to recognize that usually a school district falls somewhere in the middle, of my two very different experiences. So you already knew I was an SLP and an advocate from the name, right? But who am I? That was a question I really had to ask myself and dig into during the COVID pandemic when I was unemployed, because I got a little in my head about, if I'm not an SLP, then who am I? And I really had to dig deep. Grad school also does a number on us, but we work so hard to get to this place in our career. And sometimes it does become a really large part of our personality. And so it's important for me to dig deep into those traits and those values of who I really am. And I would say that I have a strong sense of justice. And that leads me to want to be an advocate. I like to know what the rules are. And if I agree with them, then I like to follow them, right? So I agree with the rules for the most part of IDEA, and I think it's important that we follow them. I'm also very nurturing, caring. I'm always trying to figure out a solution for my clients or help someone out. And I do think a lot of that's how I was raised, but also birth order a little bit. I'm an eldest daughter, but not just an eldest daughter. I'm an eldest cousin on both sides. So it's like magnified even more, I think. And these were things I was like kind of telling myself during that COVID spiral of like, you will always be a caring person. You will always be an advocate for others. You can do that in the framework of speech language pathology or outside of it. And I think if I hadn't had that moment, I don't know if I ever would have explored advocacy as kind of a second career, because it is a very unregulated industry. It is a title, but not a licensed profession that you get a rubber stamp to say you're a part of. And that's very different from speech language pathology, right? So kind of going deeper and having these conversations with myself, like about if it all went away, if speech language pathology went away, who is Colleen? And honestly, saying that out loud, it's kind of, now that feels like almost embarrassing, but I think like I said, we give so much to this field and to that title, that I'm sure it's hard for people who retire from speech language pathology to really give that up. I know it was for my grandma. Even in her retirement, she kind of went back and didn't really retire. Loved it so much. It was a big part of who she was, but she was also so many other things. She has since passed, and I think of her often. I wish I could talk to her about all these things, my business, the podcast, all those things. She's definitely a big inspiration for me. I have a voicemail from her that I like to listen to when I am overdoing it, because she says something like, "Oh, wow, you have a lot going on. You know, you don't always need to be the one who raises your hand." And I am. That's another part of who I am. I am the one who always raises my hand to volunteer. And it's a good reminder from her that I do have to take care of myself first, too. I'm sure a lot of you listening can relate to that.
Hi, Unfiltered listeners. Do you have an idea for a podcast? Maybe one that aligns with your therapy practice, that allows clients to be able to get to know you and builds trust before they commit to services. Or maybe you're a parent who wants to share your story because you know it can help others. Or maybe you want to interview guests with special knowledge for a limited series podcast. I had no idea the doors podcasting would open for me, and I'm so glad I invested the time and money into learning how to make a professional podcast. No matter your vision, the Podcast Accelerator will help you take it from just an idea to a full-fledged podcast. I know because it worked for me. Step by step, I learned how to define my audience, create a smooth guest experience, how to record, upload, download, edit, and more. Your SLP Dej, the creator of TPA, the Podcast Accelerator, has thought of everything, and it's all included in her course. I truly cannot recommend it enough. So if you're interested, click the link in the show notes, and it will take you to a special cart that allows me to get a percentage of the purchase, which in turn helps support this pod. Now back to the episode.
Another thing about me is I'm adventurous. I left Illinois and moved across the country, having only been to California once, with my now husband, and I didn't know anybody else out here. That was about 6 years ago. I also ride on the back of that husband's motorcycle around twisty roads and up and down mountains, and we've gone hot air ballooning a few times. I like adventure, and at the same time, I am kind of sensitive in other ways, but I really think for everything we've been through as a collective society in the last 5 years and everything that my family's been through personally, like, I really try to be mindful that this is the one life we get. And I want to take the opportunities that come to me, that feel right to me, that feel maybe like I'm a little bit scared to do, but I still want to do them. Going into business for myself was definitely one of those adventurous things, a risk I took, something that I did pretty much right after my wedding, which shout out to my husband for all of his eternal patience, because that was a choice. And in the end, I'm so glad I did it then, because I think the forward momentum of wedding planning, because that itself is a part-time job, allowed me to just be like, and my next project, like, is starting this business. And it's been a year of like seeing clients, but it took a while to like, get it off the ground and up and running. So it's been a journey. And it's led me here to host a podcast where I'm going to be talking to many different people who sit in different spots at the IEP table, who might be an OT, a PT, a school psychologist, a district administrator, a parent, an advocate, and really try to understand their experience with all the nuance that comes with the fact that every individual job is different. Every state has different educational codes. Every district practices things a little differently. And every parent's experience is different. And I hope that that's the message that comes through, is there is no one size fits all in the IEP process. You'll often hear advocates say, we hate the phrase, we don't do that here, because it is an individualized education plan and everyone is an individual. And I think when we listen to people really tell their story or their side of things, we get a good sense of that. So when I decided to create this podcast, it was really out of that desire to understand everybody a little better, because I can see from the parent side and I can see from the school side, having been a school speech pathologist myself, that we are missing each other a whole lot. And we're blaming each other also a lot on either side. There's a blame game going on there. And one of the things we're going to talk about on this podcast, and I'm going to get into in depth in an upcoming episode, is that neither side is the bad guy. When we have a lack of support, we have to explore why that is. Why a district might say, we don't do things like that here. Why it may be kind of their policy to not offer a certain kind of programming. And often this comes back to money. This comes back to funding. This is not going to be a current events podcast. I certainly can't keep up with all of the constant changes, but the overarching themes are something we are going to get into, because truly, I think it is the elephant in every IEP room. I believe everybody at that table is doing the best they can with what they have, and they're often overworked and under-resourced. And that's something I'm trying to help parents understand, while at the same time trying to help the team understand what the true spirit of the law of IDEA is, right? When it comes to parent collaboration and parent participation. The IEP meetings are not a presentation, but are really supposed to be a group project. And we're so seldom treating them that way because we don't have the time or the resources to give those meetings, I think, the attention they deserve. Systemic problem, the elephant in the room, right? And I'll say again, we are not on here to bash public education. We're here to get to the root of what's really going on and why, and what it's like to be that OT on the other side of the table, that school psych on the other side of the table, that parent on the other side of the table. Because when we're in those meetings, it's often very buttoned up and very formal. And I try to facilitate, meetings that people feel like they could speak their mind at, because I really do want the honest opinions of the professionals at the table. But nobody's ever saying completely what they're thinking, right? So that's what we're going to do here. And if you want to come on here and be anonymous, that's fine by me, because I know that speaking your mind about your workplace is not, it's not always something people are willing to do. It can be a risk as well. But I think we've got to start talking about this, because if we don't, we're going to continue to misunderstand each other and what the real problem is, which is systemic. And really, I think educators, related service professionals, and parents all need to be on the same side, which is to support public education, the promise of public education, because it is the only thing that is holding up our students who have disabilities right to an education, right to a free and appropriate education. We cannot throw away this system and start over. We can only improve upon it because it is available to everyone. And that's me giving away the whole lead there. But if that's a conversation you're interested in joining, I encourage you to leave a comment. If something I said today resonated with you, if something I said today is something we have in common, or what you would like to learn more about, because I really do want this to be a conversation.
If you're an SLP who is interested in learning more about how I became a special education advocate and my recommendations for how to start an advocacy business on the side of your 9-to-5 as an SLP, I recommend the course Side Biz SLP, created by your SLP Dej. I was a guest speaker for that course and recorded over an hour of content with course recommendations, practical tips for scheduling advocacy work, and ideas for how to market your services. My affiliate link will be in the show notes below. You've been listening to Unfiltered IEPs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe to the podcast, rate and review to help others find the podcast, and connect with me on social media at theadvocate.slp on Instagram. And if you want to keep the conversation going, share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening.